Welcome to the Quasi-Chaotic Podcast, Episode 5, where Jesse Somer and I, Najib Al Chamaa, explore topics related to self-actualization, living to our fullest potential. We cover questions such as, can personalities change? How can we make the best decisions possible? Is there such a thing as time enjoyed and time well spent? And why does my sneeze sound like a dying banshee's last opera note? While commuting to work, during lulls between meetings, and when you return home after a long day, how often do you feel overwhelmed by despondency? How frequently do you find yourself reaching for your phone, seeking that dopamine hit to numb the all too familiar feeling of boredom? It's a boredom that seems to haunt every moment you're not shielded from the mundanity, the mediocrity, and those self-flagellating thoughts you desperately wish to escape. We squander countless hours going through the motions with no tangible rewards or even memories to confirm that, indeed, we're striving for self-actualization. In this episode, Jesse and I will pose questions that might unsettle you. So brace yourself and be on the defensive. Things could get confrontational. Let's get ready to rumble. Okay, I'll stop that now. Netflix and chill. What comes to your mind, Jesse, when I say the phrase Netflix and chill?
Well, obviously, Netflix and chill is one of these colloquialisms that a younger generation uses to infer they go to one another's house to have sex. But I don't know if that's the context that we were going to discuss today, because I think what I have recognized in myself is that over the years, I'm sure I know I spent way too much time doing things that weren't helping me progress on the journey that I want to go on in terms of my desired life outcomes. And, I grew up in America where as a child, we had a lot of TV channels, even back in, the 1980s. And, we had this big plastic board with buttons on it, and you could just hit a button, like a physical button that pressed down and in, and that would change the channel. And you had about, I think, 32 of them. And right then I started to get that short attention span. Oh, this is boring, I'm going to the next one. This is boring, I'm going to the next one. And subsequently, as life progressed, I'm sure I spent way too much time watching television, watching Netflix, searching the internet, being on social media, and all these other forms of media that I think this younger generation that we mentioned earlier, which you might even be part of, is also having trouble with. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I think a lot of these discussions, I suppose, are spurred from my dissatisfaction with the world as I see it. There's this inner impatience with the hypocrisy that I see, and oftentimes that I've felt myself. And from, I suppose, this dissonance of here's what I believe versus here's what I'm seeing, I tend to start saying what I mean and just putting it out there to perhaps start making sense of my own experience, but the experiences of others, because I can't seem to square what people are doing with what they tell me they want. You sort of alluded to your idea of what Netflix and chill is, and I just want to maybe unpack that a bit more. So when I think Netflix and chill, oftentimes there's sexual innuendo, but also the other side of it is just chilling, really. You're watching Netflix and you're just going to chill, and maybe there's somebody there. And I feel like a lot of us spend a lot of time investing much of our life into what I find to be menial, what I find to be a waste of time. And if I think a lot of people put enough thought into it, they think the same way too. And I want to preface everything we say from this point on with, listener, you will most likely take offense to much of what I have to say. I don't know about Jesse. He's the nice guy here. But much of what I have to say is going to be pointy, and it's going to be confronting, and it's going to sound judgmental. But again, this is all for you to think about, to contemplate, maybe whatever feelings that you start grappling with, question them. Question why you feel the way that you do.
And look, Najib, I think your anger is a good anger. It's a healthy anger. And
So fucking sick of it, Jesse.
there's a saying, nice guys finish last. And you know, I think the reason that you have done well in your life thus far, in my opinion, is maybe because you didn't try to please everyone. And whereas maybe I took the other route, I started out angry and then I thought, this isn't working very well. And then I tried to be nice, but I don't think that worked out too well either. So I think there's
Mm,
probably some kind of middle ground which might be healthy. That's
mm.
another topic for another day, though. But let's go. Let's look at this Netflix and chill. So
Yeah.
it's very, this, everyone who watches it knows this. It's designed to get you sucked in to keep
Mm,
watching. As soon as an episode finishes, it usually finishes on a cliffhanger. And then it says next episode and it starts loading up automatically and it's going to start. And that's when, in that 5 seconds or whatever, you have
mm,
to decide, am I going to watch this next one or am I going to turn it off?
mm,
And you hear people about binge watching,
mhm,
and that's where they don't turn it off. They just let it keep going and they sit there in front of it and they're chilling, and on some level they're enjoying it. Usually,
mm,
sometimes they watch stuff that they aren't even interested in, or they thought they might be interested in, and then they found out it wasn't as good as they expected, but they keep watching it anyway.
mm,
But even with the stuff that they like to watch and enjoy watching, like, you get your little kicks out of it, but then when you turn it off, there you go. There's your night gone. Yeah, you
mm,
chilled, but maybe you didn't chill, because chilling is relaxing, right? And if what you were watching was
mm,
people getting their heads blown off, or, there's a lot of stuff out there which is pretty violent. I don't know how relaxing that truly is when you turn it
mm,
off and walk away. Just like watching the news, same thing.
mm.
But I think you want to think about what you could be doing instead that could help you on your own path.
What we're focusing on right now is Netflix, but for me, this topic is broader than that. It has to do with distraction in general. So I wanted to start off with Netflix and chill, just because a lot of people are more familiar with what that is and how that feels. But I want to take a step back and just talk about distraction in general. But like you said, are you really chilling? And what do you mean by chilling? And for those that maybe say, well, Najib, it's a time for me to wind down. I've had a long and difficult day and I'm a hard worker, so I just need to wind down. And that's what I want to question. The people that justify their inaction, their inactivity, their unproductiveness with this need to quote unquote wind down. So whether they're actually chilling or not is in question. And these days, TikTok is one of those. It doesn't necessarily have to be TikTok. It's basically these short clips, whether it's YouTube Reels or Instagram Reels or TikTok Reels. You're just sort of sat there hunched over, scrolling with your thumb, just repeatedly listening to these satisfaction videos where they're, I don't know, cutting through butter with like a hot knife. And in the background, you're hearing this very vague facts, trivial facts that are somewhat interesting. I've seen these videos and they've got, hundreds of thousands of views. And you just sat there scrolling through this fucking phone or watching this show of that's tuned, by the way, to our primal instincts. Haven't you noticed? It's either, violence or just sex. It's those two. Those two sell tickets. You got a pair of titties, got an ass, you're going to moot someone, guy or girl. Of course, I'm not discriminating here. And there you go. You've got your clicks. Again, finely tuned to our primal instincts, to what get us going, to shock and awe and X factor. And that is what I'm questioning, whether it's actually, in fact, a time for you to wind down, or it's just a way for you to justify doing nothing on your couch after work because you've told yourself, I've done enough. I've done enough. Now, I'm just going to illustrate what you could be doing otherwise, and then maybe we'll work our way backwards to figure out, well, how is that even possible? Maybe I don't have the energy for it. So let's say you come home
Come
from
back from
work,
work. Yeah.
unless you work at home, and you're tired. And now, instead of watching Netflix, what you're going to do is you're going to do maybe a bit of relaxing meditation. you're then going to go on a walk across the river, listening to your favorite podcast. As you're walking along the river, you're going to come across a person, have a conversation. You're going to go have coffee. Well, you might come back and you've got a bonsai tree hobby and you're going to snip a thing or two there. And look, you've got 10 minutes, so you may as well practice some piano. Okay, let's say you don't want to think and maybe read a book. You might want to maybe practice a bit of magic. You might do some whittling, right? You might knit. You might watch, instead of all this violence, you might watch a lecture on your favorite topic. Now, as I'm saying all these things, the listener might be thinking to themselves, oh, well, either that's boring or that's too much work. And my first question is, what makes you say that? What makes you think that there aren't a plethora of things out there that you can enjoy, but also find very productive and help you grow skills, and not necessarily skills that involve, I don't know, sport or showmanship. It could just be something inward, again, like meditation or just cleaning. Some people find that therapeutic. And so, again, the question of that doubt, that skepticism, that feeling you're feeling right now, listener, that's what I want you to question. What makes you think what I'm saying is implausible, right? Or not doable? Are you so clung on to this idea, this comfort of Netflix and chill, this idea of just distracting yourself with a glass of wine? You're just going to sign off for the day, or you're just going to lay back and relax. What makes you think you can't relax and be productive at the same time? And the topic of productivity is a topic of its own. But again, being productive doesn't necessarily insinuate, again, these outwardly skills. It can be inwardly too.
I think part of the problem could be people put in a lot of energy at their work. Most people, well,
Mm,
but let's presume that they do. But you've told me some stories about people at work who don't really work that hard. But let's presume that people do work hard and then they come home and they're tired. I think that a lot of people presume that doing something productive or enjoyable is
mm,
going to take more energy, and they presume or assume that they don't have that those stores of
mm,
energy, right? And so they just do the thing that doesn't take any energy. And I'm a culprit of this, especially in the past. But you find once you start sort of practicing that muscle that once you start something, you do get a little bit of energy. All of a
mm,
sudden, it
mm.
comes. Once you just take that first step, you go, oh, wow, I did have energy to do this. Right. And it's surprising.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I was feeling the same way. I think I had too many bananas. I like bananas. And I just felt lethargic. I was just on my chair laying back and I was feeling drowsy and sleepy. And so I decided to go rollerblading. And when I came back, I had the second wind. I was ready to go and do all sorts of other stuff. But yeah, on this topic of cognitive dissonance, people might hear what we're saying now, and there's this need to maybe reject and justify why, no, actually, I shouldn't be doing the things you're saying, and you're just being a productivity freak. And that's not how I ought to live my life. And I ought to tune down because it's healthy, because that's what I read online. A doctor said that a glass of wine and this and that is good for me. Well, I beg to differ. And I think wasting your life away on nothing more than pixels on a screen, if you're a video game addict like I used to be, or just watching a rerun of your favorite anime for the 600th fucking time, I think there's more that you could be doing, not for the sake of being productive, but just to make the most out of what you're permitted on this blessed planet. I mean, we're not here for long, right? And
Mm.
every hour that you spend counts. And I'm not saying that every hour ought to be invested in learning a skill. It ought to be invested in what I think ought to be diversifying experiences and maximizing experience. So that is an assumption I'm making here, that the listener takes interest in that, right? Because some people, that isn't what they want for themselves. For example, recently I was speaking to a Muslim, a really close friend of mine. And on the topic of self-actualization, this question cropped up and I found it incredibly intriguing, because what he said was, well, look, I am not particularly interested in living this life to its fullest potential, because my best life awaits me in the afterlife. I mean, look, it's one I respect. I respect other people's beliefs. But what I'm trying to say here is, if self-actualization isn't of interest to you, then that's okay. But what I'm alluding to and what I am questioning has to do for those in pursuit of self-actualization, but still, for whatever reason, decide to waste away their hours after work, before work, during work, to nothing more than the ephemeral, the meaningless, the trivial. I want to talk about boredom, because a lot of the reason Because what I'm often told, right, when I ask people, "Oh, why are you on TikTok? Why are you on YouTube? Why do you play these video games?" They often tell me because they're bored. And our relationship with boredom and our attention spans, something I'd like to talk about a bit now, because boredom isn't a time in which you simply have nothing to do, okay? Because that's what most people think. It's like, well, I've got nothing to do, therefore I am bored. It's
Mm,
when none of the options you have or believe to have appeal to you. Okay, so
mm,
so think of the time where maybe you may have found yourself staring at a wall, maybe fidgeting, restless, right? Maybe sifting through the 10 things that you normally do at home, right? I either take the dog out for a walk, I either watch this Netflix series or YouTube or speak to a friend on WhatsApp, and you're sort of going through them. In the same way, you sort of go to the fridge because you're hungry, and then you walk away from the fridge because there's nothing good to eat, but then you come back to the fridge because you're hungry, and so there's this like deprecating cycle of standards, right? Where you eventually succumb to a can of tuna, and you go, fuck it, I'll just have this. That's a sort of way a lot of people live their lives. Is like, these are the 10 things I do when I'm home, when I'm free, and which one do I want to do first, or what do I want to do now? And they kind of go through the list and they just basically surrender to whatever they feel like and basically assume an ill-fated afternoon, which blows my mind
mm.
because of the millions and billion things out there, of the people and different places you can go, and the practices you can commit to and practice. How can you tell me that tonight's going to be a boring night? How can you say that? How can it ever be the case that you're going to sit there on your couch going, I have nothing to do? Really? You have nothing to do? What do you think about that?
Well, I've been around for a while, so I know that there's a lot to do. You could have a crack at so many different things. You could, if you, even if you just wanted to read, right? You could spend your entire life reading books and never crack 1% of the total books out there, right?
Mm,
Like there's just so much to do and so many things to try. And maybe people think, oh, it's too difficult to try a new thing. And so they
mm,
don't. But every time you do try a new thing, you're like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool, or this is very difficult. I don't know if it's for me, but at least you gave it a shot then and you know about it a little bit. Whereas I think the assumption that there's nothing to do comes from not understanding the massive potentiality that exists in life.
a lot of people assume that this change of experience is necessarily going to be challenging. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. It could be something you actually want to do, right? But maybe you just haven't considered the 100 things you can do, and you're only thinking of the 15 things you should do or ought to do, right? So I mentioned piano earlier, and that might be the only instrument that came to your mind. Well, I don't want to learn instruments. Well, there's hundreds of other instruments out there.
Mm,
Do you know what it's like playing them? Maybe you enjoy playing the saxophone. Consider that. Going back to boredom, because there's this experiment I wanted to share with you, just to show you how averse to this concept of boredom we are, although our relationship with boredom ought to change. There's the social psychologist, his name's Timothy Wilson. So I think it was in around 2014. He did this experiment where he basically asked a bunch of teenagers, young adults, whether they would pay money not to get shocked with electricity. And pretty much all of them said, no, I pay you money not to get shocked. He asked them this before this experiment. In the experiment, what happened was he asked them to sit in a room on their own with nothing to do for 15 minutes. Okay. And he gave them a button. And he's like, you can press this button if you want to shock yourself. So he left them in that room for 15 minutes, separately, of course. And despite being told that they would be paid money to avoid the shock, 25% of women and 67% of men actually shocked themselves. They would rather face physical pain than boredom.
wow.
I mean, what does that tell you about our relationship with boredom? So when we're bored, what goes on? What goes on in our head, Jesse? What happens to us? Tell me.
Most people, I think a lot of people haven't got much experience with meditation, like you mentioned before, where you learn how to slow your thoughts down and even try and empty your brain of thoughts. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with that idea. It seems like the natural human way of existence is our thoughts just keep going and going and going, right?
Mm,
And so being in a room by yourself for 15 minutes with your own thoughts, like just spinning like on a reel,
mm,
it could be quite stressful, especially if your thoughts are thinking about things that aren't necessarily positive.
mm,
And I can't say that we're the happiest generation in history. There's, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who are on antidepressants, anxiety medication. You know, there's a lot of people who have professed that they're unhappy in the modern era, right? So
Mm.
you can assume that sitting in a room, a lot of people, their thoughts aren't just going to be random thoughts or positive, joyful thoughts. They might be
Mm.
thoughts that are actually difficult to deal with.
And that's what I want to get to. There's a reason why when people tell you, well, I'm bored, that's why I go on TikTok. That's why I'm on Netflix. That's why I distract myself. And what I think is happening isn't necessarily that they're trying to wind down. They're just trying to escape the reality of their situation, of their circumstances. Because
Mm.
if you can't sit there on your own with your thoughts and be content and not want to shock yourself because boredom is that unbearable, I think it isn't you winding down. It's not you relaxing. It's you running. It's you escaping.
It's escaping those negative thoughts. It's escaping those thoughts about, geez, I wish I was in a better position in my life. I wish I had a better job. I wish I had a better partner. I wish I had better hobbies. And if the device is not in your hand, for some reason, your brain is going to want to think about things, because guess what? Your brain must be wired to want to be joyful and happy. And so it sends these thoughts in saying, hey, why don't you do something so that you can get in a better position in your life?
Shock me so I don't have to think of that. If you've convinced yourself I do these things to chill and relax, maybe you should think twice. Maybe you should sit in a room for 15 minutes and see if you can have a good time or reflect. And speaking of reflection, what happens during boredom is this thing called autobiographical planning. And what that is basically you going through your life, your situation, and naturally what you feel inclined to do is to problem solve. You start to think of the problems that you have and you start to contemplate ways around them, ways to fix them, ways to amend them. And for a lot of people, that's not something they want to do. It's so much easier to tune into sex and drama and satisfy those urges than it is to actually face the reality of maybe your unfortunate circumstances or tribulations and do something about them. And we mentioned attention earlier, and unfortunately, life is so much more boring than what we see on TV.
Life isn't always dramatic, and it shouldn't always be dramatic, and it needn't always be dramatic. And if you have too much drama in your life, it's uncomfortable.
But
Take
that's
it
what we're
from me.
drawn to. That's what we're drawn to. We want to watch these embarrassing videos of people slipping and falling and Rambo shooting the heads off of all these bad guys, and Desperate Housewives, right? And The Bachelor. We're drawn to these things. It's exciting. It's different. It's so much more entertaining than my boring, mundane life that consists of nothing more than going to meetings, taking minutes, typing on this keyboard, and coming back home to nothing, to again more Netflix and chill. And because all this content is just getting exceedingly crazier and shorter and more finely tuned to our primitive instincts, the harder it is to make sense and enjoy the more simpler things in life. And so having access to bigger, better, faster, stronger, cuter, and crazier modes of media, right? From one viral trend to another, each movement, each story leads to another, and then another, and then another, each finely tuned to stimulate our deepest primal instincts of shock and awe to hijack our attention away from any of the mundane experiences we take for granted, right? We board one bandwagon, jump on to the next viral thing. Oh, have you seen Conor McGregor do that? Whether it's political, whether it's hip hop or K-pop or shit pop, whatever it is, we're just jumping from one thing to the next viral trend, the next war, the next, quickly acclimating to each new high, unimpressed with the status quo, right? In psychology, we call this hedonic adaptation, right? As we
Okay.
helplessly tread the hedonic treadmill, because this baseline of entertainment, given what TikTok and Twitter and all these media is providing us, our bars are set so high, right? We're watching the best comedians, we're watching the best actors, the best magicians, that when we're confronted with our friends and their comedy, right, and their acting and their magic, we're always let down. We're always disappointed. It's never good enough, So in a way, we're sort of blunting our ability to enjoy the present.
Some would argue when I watch Netflix, I enjoy myself.
Mm.
right? And there's that saying, time enjoyed is time well spent, right?
Hmm.
So if I enjoyed myself, then I spent my time well. Why don't you piss off, you wankers, and go play with your bonsai tree and let me watch my fucking Netflix, right? I really like it.
In that case, actually, I'm glad you worded it that way. It's very apathetic, I don't give a shit attitude, because that's what you will often hear. If that's the case, then that's fine. Hey, listen, you know what you should do? Turn off this fucking podcast and never listen to it again. How about that? If you aren't interested in living to your fullest potential, if you aren't interested in making the most of your life, and again, this doesn't necessarily mean more work. I am not saying that you should wake up again at 6 a.m., read this book, go to yoga, jump in a cold pool. If that doesn't work for you, then it's not for you. End of story. But what makes you think of all the things you can do, of all the people you
Mm,
can meet, of all the crazy, weird, simple things you can commit yourself to, that at least some of those things won't tickle the cockles of your heart? And for you to reject what I just said is for you to deny your freedom. And as Jean-Paul Sartre put it, is to live on bad faith, is to rely
mm,
on the very thing that's keeping you where you are, where you don't want to be, where you have to constantly distract yourself because you'd rather be entranced in the next controversial headline, the next Netflix series, the next AAA video game release, the next tragedy, the next election, the next Hollywood scandal, the next witch hunt, the next 6-second viral clip, the next overly dramatized reality TV show, the next hysteria we desperately depend on for a fix. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But don't tell me it's because I'm being overly productive and I'm being judgmental. No, admit that of all the things you can be doing, you reject the possibility of a better life because it's much easier to give in to what you know has been engineered to capture your attention, for with nothing to show for. I was a video game addict for 8 years and I spent up to 10 hours a day playing video games, RuneScape, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty. I did that. So when I am the one here complaining, right, it's not coming from a place of, oh, look at me, I'm on this high horse, I've done all these things. I've been there.
mm.
I know how much time I spent and I know what I got out of it. And you know what I got out of it?
Jack shit.
But fuck all. Jack shit.
And
Nothing.
and let me just say here, Najib, because I'm older than you, is I'm an even worse culprit. Like I'm speaking from experience as well that still haunts me to this day and still affects my everyday life. And it's I think there's this natural human condition, right? That we all want to be better than what we are. We all want to expand, right? But we get scared that it's too hard. And so, like you just said, we take an easy way out with our time. But if we just tried to do those things that we think might help us down that path of becoming better at who we are, becoming the best us that we can be, then that's time better spent. You know, that helps you become who you're meant to be and expand who you are. And so that you don't live a life feeling that there's a lack or that you're not all that you could have been. Because, like you said, life is short and we only have so much time. And you and I, although we have wasted thousands of hours between us, right, we're still not dead yet. And we still have time that we can make some changes and become the best people we can be with the amount of time that we have left. It's never too late, I don't think. Some might argue that it is, but I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that every hour that I spend on something positive that I think is helping me grow as a person is worth it while I'm here.
And that's all we have, the present. I know what it feels to waste time. I know what it feels to quote unquote enjoy time well spent. And in retrospect, I don't think it was time well spent. And
Mm,
even in the moment, oftentimes it wasn't time well spent. And a lot of people have to admit this. Like when I was playing video games, I would get upset. Of course, I would rage. I would, if anything, it was just another experience. It wasn't that my average happiness was higher than as if it would have been if I wasn't playing a video game. Again, given the hedonic treadmill, we can only get so happy or so upset in any given point in time. I can tell myself that I was playing all these video games, I was happier in the moment, but it simply wasn't the case.
Mhm.
And so I am very sensitive to wasting time, especially time spent on experiences that don't have anything to offer, not even a memory. I mean, how often do we forget the time in between experiences? Maybe that ride on the bus, or maybe when you're brushing your teeth. These are memories just fade away, they disappear, they're never with us. And that to me is time wasted. And some might say, well, Najib, you can't remember everything. Well, you know what? Actually, psychologists say that our memory is infinite. Do you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
There is no limit to how much we can actually remember and memorize.
So are you saying that if I try to brush my teeth differently every time I brush my teeth, there's more chance it's going to ingrain in my memory each of those funny teeth brushing
Exactly.
times?
You've hit the nail on the head. I know people that go on 2 hour long tram rides or train rides to work. And in that time, they do nothing. They just sit there. Of course, that's fine if you're, again, having some autobiographical planning and kind of ruminating over what transpired in that last meeting and figuring out better ways to approach it. However, you could be reading a book. You could be listening to podcasts. You could be doing some origami. You could be meditating. You could be doing so much with this time to make it memorable, to make it useful. And it doesn't have to be more work. It could just be time well spent and time enjoyed. That is possible.
I agree 100%, Najib. And like I said, I agree because I've been on both sides of the coin there. You know, I've been an extreme time waster. I probably still do waste time in some contexts, whether I like it or not. But at the same time, I've also learned how to make the most of moments, just little moments where, yeah, like you said, you can just wash the dishes and listen to 10 minutes of a cool philosopher, or just go and sit down and play guitar for a minute.
I mean, if you're in a relationship, consider how much time it would take you to write a very simple short poem. It could be just roses are red, violets are blue. It could be dumb. It could be simple. It could be
Mm,
something you copy paste from the internet. Write on a bit of paper and stick it in her sock or his sock. How long is that going to take you? Three
not long
minutes?
at all.
And I guarantee you that is a memory they will never forget. That's something they're going to be telling all their colleagues, all their friends, all their family.
If it's a good poem.
Again, this is just an idea, but consider the innumerable experiences you could have. I mean, have you considered how many tips of a tea bag make for the best tea? Have you tried maybe doing a handstand? Just try it. What do you have to lose? I know some people that committed to entire career just because they attended an event on Groupon, and that turned out to be a career. You could message people you haven't contacted in a while. You can go through your WhatsApp list, just scroll as far down as you can, and just start a conversation. And all of a sudden, now you have access to this person's life and what's been going on in their life. And oh my goodness, this happened. Oh, what happened to Karen? And now you're down this rabbit hole of experiences, and they're like, oh, let's catch up. And now you're having a Zoom meeting with all your ex high school friends. And hey, one of them is in the country. Hey, let's go meet him. Let's go see how he's doing. Right? How can you assume an ill-fated afternoon when there's so much you can do to make your moments memorable?
You could pick a flower and hand it to the next person that you meet.
That is beautiful. You could compliment somebody on their hat. Here's a tip, Jesse. When you notice people wearing something that's a little different, right? Maybe it's a bow tie. Maybe it's an unusual hat. Maybe it's makeup that's slightly different. The best thing you could do, compliment them for that. Say, hey,
Yeah.
that's a nice hat. That's a beautiful hat. Or maybe it's the way they're standing. I love your posture. Again, it might sound weird. There's a reason why they stand out. It's because they've made an effort. And
Yeah.
that will leave them with a memory they will not forget. Small things that you could do. So, Jesse, do you know why workaholics work so hard?
Same reason people watch Netflix, my friend. It's so that they
Bingo.
don't have to think about all these things, their problems, where they're lacking in their lives, what's missing, their feelings. Human beings are awesome at this.
You're so good at this. So here's what I want you to do, listener. Put yourself in a room for 15 minutes, put your phone away, and sit there with your thoughts. If you can't do that without pain or sadness or some deep sense of dissatisfaction, you've got your work cut out for you. Okay. And if you're willing to distract yourself with more video games, with more Netflix, with more outings to maybe nightclubs or bars, or even with more study, or perhaps with more work, if that's what you want to do that for as long as you can. But one day you're going to wake up and it's going to be orders of magnitude harder to resolve whatever dissonance you've been living with. And one day you may wake up at the ripe age of 37 and you're going to wonder, what the fuck have I done with my life? What have I done? And this really upsets me, Jesse, because I've seen people like this. I know a lot of people like this. I've seen the hardships
I,
they've had to face.
I think you're looking at one right now, my friend.
I mean, how does that make you feel? What do you wish could have been different? Do you think your situation was completely unavoidable?
No, I do not. I think it came down to me probably not having enough confidence or self-esteem to go and make those changes and do those things, letting fear stop me from doing things.
Fear. Fear of what?
Fear of failure, fear of success, because that would be so different. Lots of kinds of fear.
And what I'm thinking of now is all the reasons that would prevent the listener from, say, doing something about it, to actually take action and put themselves in a room for 15 minutes, as opposed to simply putting this podcast away and pretending they've never heard a word we said. What is stopping them? And I think, you know what I think? Because we were talking about this earlier today, Jesse. I think it's hope.
What, you think it's hope?
I think it's hope.
People just want to hope for the best without doing anything different, that some divine force will come in and make the change. Is that
Yes,
what you mean?
that things will turn for the better. That they've fallen so far behind this hope they still cling on to, that this journey of redemption, for example, if I have always wanted to be, say, the best dancer, I've always wanted to be the popular kid, I always wanted to learn this instrument to the point where I'm in an orchestra, to be a clinical psychologist, clinging on to this hope, because the steps as you imagine them to be are unpalpable. These aren't things you want to do. You don't want to grind away at this instrument anymore, right? You don't want to turn another page of brain and behavior. And what I think keeps people where they are is this hope that one day they'll get there. And I think is this very hope that we need to get rid of, that we need to let go of. I think the concept of hope has been more of a detrimental factor than it is
You don't
positive.
you don't think it's helpful. I mean, I think that hope without action is blind hope. It's unfounded. It's you're leaving things to chance. Whereas just getting action involved, whether you hope or not, action is what is going to give you a chance to move forward on these things that you want to proceed on
Yes,
doing.
but Jesse, what if action towards this hope I cling on to, this dream? What if these actions, these set of actions that I know precisely in which order I have to do them, exactly how to do them? What if this action is just something that makes me queasy?
Yep, I know
So
all
is
about
it,
that.
well, is it fair then to tell the listener to take action? I think no. I think get rid of that hope. I think whatever you're telling yourself to be not worth your time isn't worth your time. This hope of being this person who you don't want to be, let go of it. Actually, I'm going to share some Greek mythology. I'm going to tell you a quick story, Jesse.
Okay.
So the ancient Grecian mythical figure Pandora, in her gift of curiosity, tempted her betrayal of what her father Zeus asked of her, to never open the box, Pandora's box. Have you heard of Pandora's box?
Yeah, of course.
Well, it was actually a jar. So Zeus gave her this jar. He
Yeah.
gave her this jar to tempt her curiosity, because he said its contents were not meant for mortal eyes. Now, the thing is, Zeus hated humans. Okay, he wanted to punish humans for accepting the gift of fire that Pandora's brother-in-law, Prometheus, rebelliously equipped them with, the humans. So what Zeus did to spite them, he secretly used this jar to fill it up with all the forces of evil. So muted descendants of the dark and evil, children of primordial deities, Nyx, goddess of the night, and Erebus, god of darkness, Apate, deceit, Garrus, old age, Momos, blame, Dysmonia, anarchy, and a bunch of others, which I won't name. And so he gave her this jar, and he told her, don't open this jar. It's not meant for mortal eyes. But of course, Pandora, in her curiosity, she opened the jar. And thus came the end of the Golden Age, a period of peace, harmony, stability, and prosperity, a time before the evils existed, when men lived amongst the gods in a world of abundance and serenity. And Pandora, in a panic, as these evils were coming pouring out of this jar, she was able to seal the jar shut, leaving behind one little last creature, Elpis. Do you know what Elpis translates to?
No.
Hope. A matter of debate among scholars across the ages, some maintain that Elpis, the final spirit a spiteful Zeus wanted for man, was in fact the worst of them all. To existentialist philosophers like Nietzsche, hope prolonged man's daily suffering with the false expectation of something good to come. That's what I think of hope. And so what I suggest, if we are going to start making suggestions, is whatever identity you think you ought to be, right? Whatever expectations, dreams, or hopes that have been imparted on you, what your parents have been telling you to pursue, what society suggests you ought to be, whether you're a YouTube influencer or an astronaut, whether it's your cousin at a birthday party who your family seems to cheer and celebrate besides you. Let go of that, because whatever you're pursuing, whatever you've been distracting yourself of with TikTok and Netflix, let go of that hope, and maybe, just maybe, you'll have hope in becoming the best person you can be. And on that note, thank you so much for listening to this very short episode of the Quasi-Chaotic Podcast. Jesse, any last words?
So the next time you're in the evening, you've had a long day, you've got your phone in front of you, and you've also got other things that you think you might want to do with your time, and you're about to pick up that phone, and you're about to get your thumb ready to start scrolling, tell that thumb to fuck off.